is that Nikolas Cruz will plead guilty to the 2018 school shooting in Parkland, Florida. It's still expected that jurors will be seated to decide whether he should receive the death penalty for the massacre. That plea is expected next Wednesday. In court this morning, Cruz entered a guilty plea to a separate charge of assaulting a sheriff's deputy who was guarding him in jail following his arrest for the Parkland school shooting. Broward Circuit Judge Elizabeth Scher asked Cruz if he understood what a guilty plea in that case could mean for him.
I need to advise you that the state is going to be using this conviction in this case as evidence of an aggravating factor for purposes of arguing in favor of the death penalty. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
And do you understand the meaning of an aggravating factor? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Cruz has confessed to carrying out the mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in 2018. 17 students and staff were killed, 17 others were injured. A member of the British Parliament has been killed. David Amos was stabbed to death while meeting with his constituents in the southeast of England. Paramedics tried to save him, but the Conservative Party lawman died on the scene. Police say they arrested a 25-year-old man and recovered a knife. This and other attacks on lawmakers in Britain reinforces ongoing concerns about keeping MPs safe while they engage in face-to-face meetings that are critical to the democratic process. You're listening to NPR News. Tensions are rising in Bosnia, where the leader of the country's Serbs is threatening to withdraw from agreements with the country's Croats and Muslims. Matthew Algier reports from Sarajevo, some fear this could be a step toward another war in the Balkan region.
The Dayton Agreement that ended the Bosnian War in 1995 divided the country into two parts. One is majority Serb, the other a federation of Croats and Bosniaks. The leader of the Bosnian Serbs' main political party is Milorad Dodik. In recent days, Dodik has said he wants the Serb entity known as Republika Srpska to stop cooperating with the Croat Bosniak entity on military matters. International observers say this could be the first step toward Republika Srpska seceding from Bosnia, and that could trigger another war. Dodik insists he wants a political solution to Bosnia's problems, but he said if NATO gets involved in the dispute, the Bosnian Serbs will ask their, quote, friends for help. Dodik has long quoted support from Russia. For NPR News, I'm Matthew Algier in Sarajevo.
Suicide bombers attacked Shiite worshippers during Friday prayers in southern Afghanistan. A member of the Taliban government says at least 33 people were killed and nearly 70 others were wounded in the blast in Kandahar province. It was not yet known if an affiliate of Islamic State was behind this attack. ISIS violence targeting Afghanistan's Shiite minority has increased since U.S.-led forces left the country after 20 years of war and the Taliban returned to power. I'm Lakshmi Singh, NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Novo Nordisk, working to improve the lives of people with obesity through knowledge, science, and compassion. Because obesity is a matter of biology, not just willpower. More at truthaboutweight.com.
Science Friday.
You can join Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson in a presentation that explores the concept that there is no group of the world as emotionally potent as the one granted by a cosmic perspective. November 16th at Broward Center. Tickets at browardcenter.org and Ticketmaster.
This is Science Friday. I'm Ira Flatow. This week, an FDA advisory committee voted to recommend Moderna boosters for older Americans and people in certain at-risk groups. This comes just a few weeks after the FDA authorized a Pfizer booster for similar groups, but still leaves open the question of what boosters J&J recipients should get. Here to talk more about that and other selected short subjects in science is Amy Nordstrom, an editor for the MIT Technology Review. Welcome back, Amy.
Thank you, Ira. Great to be here.
All right, let's talk about this. I know that today all eyes are on the FDA Advisory Committee again. What's going on out there?
That's right. There are still tens of millions of Americans who are unvaccinated, and getting them vaccinated is still obviously a major focus for public health officials. But we're also now in the stage of the pandemic where there's this question about whether those who are vaccinated should get a booster to stay well protected against COVID. And if so, do they need to get the same shot that they got when they were first vaccinated, or can you kind of mix and match? Like if you originally got some shots from Pfizer, could you then get a booster from Moderna? So this week we got some new data from the National Institutes of Health on that question, and their data and studies seem to show that mixing and matching is probably fine. So anyone who got an mRNA vaccine originally will have similar levels of protection no matter whether they get the booster from Pfizer or from Moderna. But for those who originally received the J&J vaccine, which is just one shot, the NIH study found that they might have even better protection if they get a booster from Moderna or Pfizer versus getting one from J&J. So people who received one of those companies' boosters had higher antibody levels than those who got a J&J second dose. So the FDA advisory panel that's been meeting this week today is going to be doing a presentation on these mix and match results and thinking about this new data as it decides what to recommend moving forward.
Yeah, kind of confusing for a lot of us. Well, do I do this or don't I do this?
That's right, yes. The data is still preliminary. It hasn't yet been peer reviewed, and it was just one study. It's a pretty small one, too. And the advisory panel isn't really voting on this question today of the mix and match. But even if they were, it could very well be that they decide we don't have enough data on this question quite yet.
Is there any reason to expect that the FDA would not follow the recommendations of the advisory panel?
Sure, that can definitely happen. I mean, the advisory panel doesn't make the rules, it just advises, so it would still then be up to the FDA and the CDC as to how to interpret this and what to do moving forward. And the CDC is actually having a committee meeting next week on this same question of mixing and matching and what to do about boosters. So we could have more clarity and hopefully an answer on this pretty soon.
Let's move on to other FDA news. I know there was action this week with regard to e-cigarettes. What's going on here?
That's right. Now, e-cigarettes have been sold in the U.S. for years, and for a while the FDA was pretty hands-off with these products, but they've gotten a lot of scrutiny from these public health groups, worried that some of the flavors that e-cigarette makers were putting out, stuff like bubblegum and fruity flavors, were going to appeal to teenagers and maybe hook them on nicotine, even though they wouldn't ever have gotten started on regular cigarettes. On the other hand, some adult smokers have switched over to e-cigarettes, and since they produce water vapor instead of cigarette smoke, they're generally considered to be safer than smoking cigarettes. So the FDA has told e-cigarette manufacturers they have to apply to have their products that were already on the market authorized by the agency, so that the agency can kind of weigh the risks and benefits to public health of each product. And they've been going through all these applications. They've rejected millions of them already, particularly for flavored products that might really appeal to teenagers. But this week it did grant its first authorization for a tobacco-flavored e-cigarette. And Catherine Foley wrote a really good piece on this for Politico, just about how much confusion there is around why this particular product got approved and so many others haven't, and then how the FDA is going to regulate this industry moving forward.
Yeah, because, some people say I want to get off the habit. I need to wean myself off regular cigarettes, so maybe e-cigarettes are the way to go.
Exactly, that's the argument for them. And this company, that's what they're saying their product will primarily be used for. And the FDA has said, even though we've authorized this one product, we're going to be monitoring that company's advertising, making sure that they're not targeting minors and that teenagers aren't getting hooked on their products, because they could revoke it if that happens.
All right, let's move on. We reported last week on the discovery of specialized face recognition cells in monkeys, and by extension, probably in people. And there's more news this week on an effort to map the brain. I mean, it's going like crazy. Tell us about it.
Yeah, the brain, as you know, is a very complicated organ. There are thought to be like 1,000 different types of cells in the brain. We don't really know what they are or how they work together to make our brain function. So for years, scientists all around the world have been working on some really big research projects to try to help us understand that better. And this week we heard from one of those groups. They published 17 new papers all at once, made a big splash in the journal Nature describing their work so far. And their mission has really been focused on trying to identify all the different kinds of cells in the brain and make what they're calling a kind of census or an atlas of these. So they started with one specific part of a mouse's brain and its motor cortex, and that's what these papers this week mostly describe.
So that's only really a small part of the brain that they've looked at.
Yeah, it's slow work. It's slow going for sure. So that they've only mapped like 1% of the mouse's brain at this point. And once they finish the mouse's brain, they're hoping to do that by 2023. But then they want to move on and do the same thing for the human brain. And the idea is if you could explore different species, you might be able to see some of these differences and understand better how different kinds of brains evolve. But it's definitely taking some time.
Yeah, so they really want to get down on the cellular level and watch the circuitry working.
Exactly, yeah, being able to see kind of the anatomy of each cell and its components, even on a molecular level, how these cells interact with each other and communicate.
You have some sad news this week about Florida's manatees. Boy, they have been under attack ever since I can remember, for decades, either from motorboats hitting them with their propellers and gashes, and now it's even worse, more bad news.
It's true, yes. It's been a really tough year for Florida's manatees. Actually, the deadliest year on record for them. So the state has lost 10% of its manatee population just this year. Almost 1,000 manatees have died so far. And as you said, there's a number of different reasons why the Miami Herald has been some of them. One major reason is that manatees eat seagrass. They eat hundreds of pounds of it a day, and there just hasn't been as much of that around because of pollution from agriculture and septic systems along the coast. So a lot of the manatees are actually
Wow. I mean, are they on the endangered? They're not on the endangered species list, are they?
No, they were for a long time, but they got taken off a couple of years ago. It was a pretty controversial decision, and they were changed from endangered to threatened. But there is an effort now to get them back on. So some lawmakers in Florida are trying to introduce bills in Congress to really quickly get them back on the endangered species list, and we'll see if that actually happens.
They are such gentle animals. For a TV show I did years ago, I was snorkeling with them. This 2,000-pound manatee knew I was there and just kindly moved away when I came swimming by. No, they're just wonderful animals. And some uplifting news now. I understand astronomers have heard some strange radio signals. Wow. Tell us about that.
This is kind of a weird one. So this week, astronomers announced they detected some new radio waves coming from somewhere within the Milky Way that didn't really fit the patterns they'd expect from any kind of objects that they know about. And these waves were behaving in ways that are really hard for them to explain, like switching off and on at random, or dialing up or down in intensity. So this has created a big question for them about what exactly is out there emitting these radio waves, and right now they really don't know.
Do we know which part of the universe they're coming from?
Yeah, it's around the center of the Milky Way, but we don't know much more about them. They've been able to detect them on a number of different occasions over time, so it's not just a one-off instance, but they haven't yet been able to kind of hone in on what the possible source of it might be.
So this is not like a pulsar, which has a very, clock-like on-off, so signals sweeping past you. This is something sort of random?
Yeah, it seems to be. I mean, they thought about, maybe it's a pulsar, maybe it's a solar flare from a star. There's also these things called fast radio bursts, which I know you've talked about on the show. It's like a series of signals that are coming from somewhere in space and repeating, or just happening as a one-off event. But of all the things that they've considered, they've looked at a lot of possibilities. This signal still seems different since it's changing so much.
We always discover so much stuff out in the universe. We have no idea what it is. But we don't know what 96% of the universe is made out of anyhow, with the dark energy and dark matter. Throw this in with that thing.
Exactly.
Let's look ahead to the weekend. There's a planned launch for a mission called Lucy. Tell us about that.
Right, this is happening early tomorrow morning. The rocket has been rolled out to the launch pad in Cape Canaveral in Florida, and the weather's looking good, and it's all ready to go. So this is a NASA mission. It will be sending a spacecraft out to Jupiter's orbit, where there are two huge bunches of asteroids that are orbiting the sun along with Jupiter. So they follow the same route around the sun. And this NASA mission that launches tomorrow is going to be the first to go out and really take a close look at these asteroid clusters. So it's going to really spend the next 12 years exploring 8 asteroids in particular. And Ashley Strickland wrote a really nice piece about this mission for CNN with a lot of good info. And scientists think that these asteroids are leftover bits of material from when the solar system first formed. So they're hoping to get a better sense from studying them about how it happened and what exactly they're made of.
besides just having a lot of fun flying around the asteroids, can you give us some details of what the mission is trying to study?
Well, scientists have described these asteroids almost like fossils, so really understanding how they formed and what they're made of could help us know what the solar system was like 4.5 billion years ago when it formed. And they're also going to be taking a look at things like, do these asteroids have moons or craters? And craters can really help you tell how old they are when these asteroids formed.
So they think these asteroids were sort of, as you say, remnants from the formation of our solar system and just leftover pieces.
Exactly, yeah. They're kind of like a time capsule in a way of what early activity might have happened in our solar system. And so maybe by taking a closer look at them, we can kind of learn about how our own planet and others have formed.
Yeah, because we've had missions to sort of land on space bodies. None of these. Lucy is not going to land on any of these and take a sample or something and bring it back.
No, it's just going to be cruising by them, but it is kind of interesting because it's also going to be making a few trips back closer to Earth so that it can use Earth's gravity to actually reposition itself out where it needs to be by Jupiter, which is a pretty unusual aspect of this mission. Usually a spacecraft will just kind of go out and stay close to where it's investigating.
All of this allows me to say we can end with Lucy's in the sky above.
Exactly.
Thank you, Ness, for that opportunity. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Sarah.
Amy was the editor for the MIT Technology Review. We have to take a break, and when we come back, I'll look inside a research institute for indigenous benefit, run by indigenous scientists. Stay with us. This is Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
We're funded by WLRN members and by Willie the Bee Man. Proper bee removal requires 2 steps: locating the hive and extracting the honeycomb. Willie the Bee Man Bee Removal Specialist, offering live removal when possible. Details at 1-855-466-BEES.
We're funded by WLRN members and by St. Andrew's Estates, an ACTS retirement life community that's designed to help you maintain your high quality of life, or QOL, in Boca Raton. St. Andrew's Estates offers everything on campus, including a thriving social scene, daily events, resort-style restaurants and amenities, plus innovative wellness programs that can help you stay independent and strong. Learn more at bocaoasis.com.
This is Science Friday. I'm Ira Plato. Last Monday was Indigenous Peoples Day here in the U.S., a holiday to honor Native Americans and their resilience over many centuries of colonialism. Because of a long history of maltreatment and discrimination, Native Americans' health disparities are stark compared to other American populations. Illnesses like chronic liver disease, diabetes, and respiratory diseases are much more common. This is where the Native Biodata Consortium comes in. It's a biobank, a large collection of biological samples for research purposes. But what sets this facility apart from others is its purpose. Biological samples are from indigenous people, and the research is led by indigenous scientists. Joining me now are 3 of the scientists involved in this work. Crystal Sosi, co-founder and ethics and policy director of the Native Biodata Consortium, PhD candidate in genetics at Vanderbilt University. He's based in Phoenix, Arizona. Joseph Irishutta, executive director and laboratory manager of the Native Biodata Consortium. He's based in Eagle Butte, South Dakota. And Dr. Matt Anderson, assistant professor of microbiology at Ohio State University, board member and treasurer of the Native Biodata Consortium based in Columbus, Ohio. Welcome all of you to Science Friday.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You're all welcome. Kristen, talk me through the importance of having a biobank run by indigenous scientists for the benefit of indigenous people.
So for the first time really in history, we have a cohort, a wealth of indigenous expertise in precision health and genomics for the first time. And it's really great that we've been able to get these great minds together to help co-lead and found this organization. For too long in the status of biomedical history, data has been usurped from indigenous peoples, and often not to our benefit. So being able to have community members, tribal leaders, and scientists like us who come from the communities themselves to be able to advocate for how this data is collected and used is really important, especially if we're going to be talking about not just racial justice, but also genomic equity and data equity.
Krista, why do you think there's been such a lack of scientific research to benefit Native populations?
If you think about how scientists have entered indigenous communities, oftentimes it has been for this very like grand scheme of one day, some point down the line, your data, indigenous peoples, may benefit you. And this is actually the promise that a lot of scientists, particularly in the mid-90s and early 2000s, did for particularly indigenous peoples in Central and South America. They entered our remote communities, took our blood, promised us medicines, and then they disappeared. There's actually a New York Times article in which a reporter from the New York Times came back to Oceania, they reside in central Amazonia, and asked them, did they actually deliver on the promises? Where are the medicines? And the indigenous peoples angrily stated, no. But Coral Silver Prosecutors have been selling their blood and access to the genomic information. And, I talked to a lot of scientists and I asked them, are we perhaps over-promising on what precision health can deliver right here and right now? And scientists, some of them worryingly state, well, that's not our problem. Our focus right now is the research. Maybe somewhere down the line, it might translate into some benefit to the community. And unfortunately for indigenous people, we're dying at disproportionate numbers now. We cannot wait.
Joseph, do you have some of the same views and concerns about biodata being accessed by outside parties?
Yeah, so because of the settler colonial borders, often Native people who share ancestry are thought of as separate legal jurisdictions and separate exposures in that aspect. But where we do have similarities, people's interest in the genetic part and not so much interest in the health improvement part. And so they can go over the border into Mexico, Central America, South America, where those Native people do not have sovereignty or any kind of protection, and get what they want and still avoid the health improvement part.
When you say the genetics, what do you mean?
So you've seen some of these instances recently in isolated populations where they find different resistance to disease because of genetic variants. We saw that with HIV in the Scandinavian countries, where about 8% of the population was resistant to HIV because they have a cholesterol variant that prevents the virus from getting into the cells. And so big data and big pharma companies are looking for those types of genetic gift measures that will help us to basically help the whole world with health crises. But often, the addiction concept, the benefits from that type of research won't come very quickly to the community because of cost and other political issues. And so those are the kinds of genetic treasures that people are looking for.
I want to bring Matt into the discussion. Matt, I know you're a microbiologist. How does microbiology fit into the work of the Native Biodata Consortium?
Sure. So when we're talking about microbiology context, oftentimes we center that on the individual, the human, the host side. And so you've heard the microbiologist call things like an essential human organ contributes to overall health and disease states, and that's been shown to be true in a number of cases. So in thinking about performing microbial work, we need to be incorporating the host context and the implications on not just the microbes, but the human as well. So within indigenous communities, the relationships or the viewing of our relationships with different pieces of our environment are going to be a little bit different. And microbes need to be considered not just as these organisms that we're not able to see that can potentially cause disease with us, but they're really, we live in a relationship with them. They determine our health and we impact their community structure, their health. So within a microbiology context, when you're working on the microbiome, you're working with bacterial samples, archaea, fungi, etc., the relationship here that's presented itself between the microbes and you as the individual changes. So the approach that needs to be taken when performing microbiome studies in particular with indigenous people is going to look different than it does when working with individuals general populations. There's going to be this understanding of relationality that often doesn't occur within a clinical setting as you're taking samples from patients.
Can you explain that a bit more, why the microbiome of indigenous peoples will look different than non-indigenous people?
Sure. So the difference in the appearance of the microbiome is really revolving around that relationality. So the obligations that we have to all the pieces of our environment, including microbial systems that live within our guts or our skin, we have an obligation to help maintain and protect those organisms because of their exact same role that they have in relationality to us and protecting us as well. So it's more a human-centered approach as to thinking about that relationship between the microbes and the human and how that balance is fundamentally what's going to be important in promoting health of the individual as well as health for the microbiome itself.
Would you extend that sort of comparison also to the microbiome in the soil? I mean, there's a huge microbiome in the soil. Do you study that also?
So we have some new projects that have popped up specifically around microbiome in the soil, and this is being done on Cheyenne River based on land usage practices. Based on the way that humans are interacting with the soil, are we altering things in such a way that it's going to be detrimental to the microbes that are found there, and promoting the ecological health of the soil that promotes not only the ability to be able to use the land for different purposes that people are interested in revolving around agriculture and ranching, but also in the different types of plants that are able to grow based on the microbial community profiles of the soil. Are those soils now no longer able to support plants that are important for medicine, plants that are important for ceremony? So how does the human impact present itself not only in the microbial contents, tracing itself back to humans, but also